Okay, it's recording.
Great, thank you. Great, so we are recording, and for the record, this is the Montgomery County Delegation Metro Washington Area Committee. And on Monday, September 27th, 2021, we have a briefing here with Wssc Water regarding bill assistance and then wastewater geothermal. So Guy, if you want to maybe introduce everyone on your team first, and then we'll start with the bill assistance overview, take questions, and then we'll move on to wastewater geothermal.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chairwoman, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Guy Andes, Government Affairs Manager for Wssc Water. As the Vice Chair alluded to, we'll be providing an update on Wssc Water's customer financial assistance programs and a briefing on wastewater geothermal. Joining me today to present this information are our Director of Customer Service, Crystal Knight-Lee, our Division Manager for Customer Engagement and Advocacy, Kelly Kaplan, the Sustainability and Support Services Division Manager, Fred Lees, and Wssc Water's Energy Manager, Rob Taylor. Without further ado, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and Crystal and Kelly can start their presentation.
Great, thank you. So if you want to go ahead and do your presentation, and is it your preference that we wait until the end for questions?
Whatever works better for you all. We'll handle it either way.
All right, well, I think there's 4 of us here now, so go ahead and stick your hand up. If use the raise hand function if you have a question along the way, because I can't see everybody when the screen is shared. Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Crystal Knight-Lee, Director of Customer Service, and with me this afternoon is Kelly Kaplan, Division Manager for Customer Engagement and Advocacy, and we appreciate the opportunity to have time on your agenda to talk about customer financial assistance and some of the challenges, unfortunately, that we are seeing. So on our agenda, again, I'll be presenting an overview with Kelly on our financial assistance programs, but I want to start off with more information about our challenges, particularly our revenue challenge, and then I want to talk about our financial assistance timeline and current landscape, and then we can take questions throughout or at the end, whichever you prefer. Next slide. Okay, so what you're seeing is a snapshot of our current past due account situation. We are very challenged with a severe number of past due accounts. And you can see the chart on, I guess, on your left, first starts off with fiscal year FY20. You can see where we were with the number of past due accounts just being over 64,000, and where we are today, now over 93,000 past due accounts, really representing a 45% increase. And then when you look over at the past due amounts, you can see how significant those past due accounts are in terms of the amount of dollars that are outstanding. So again, in the beginning of fiscal year 20, we started off with 26 million past due, and now we're close to 68 million. So that's a very significant concern and challenge. We did make a decision to resume water service turnoffs. We did resume turnoffs in August for commercial customers, and then in September for residential customers. We worked really hard to connect with customers through customer engagement and outreach to give customers an opportunity to pay. And even with the resumption of turnoffs, we still have a very robust customer engagement strategy where we're sending letters and robocalls, actually making a live call before we initiate a turnoff. So unfortunately, I did start the presentation with this just to share how significant of a challenge we're having with our revenues. Next slide, Kelly. So if we just step back for a moment and look at our financial assistance timeline, we've put a few milestones on the timeline so you could see some of the efforts that we've undertaken to really assist our customers. And we started back with fiscal year 20 and actually July of 2019 to share with you, our modernization effort around our new billing system, the new rate structure that was put in place, and the newly redesigned water bill. So all of those things really came to bear in July of 2019. It was really an initiative to really modernize our customer service and to provide better service to our customers. And so you can see since then, we've moved forward with a number of initiatives to enhance our financial assistance by increasing the amount that customers can draw from the water fund, extending payment plans for our non-cap customers. And by the way, for our customers who are enrolled in our customer assistance program, they have up to 48 months to make their payment. And so for those customers that are outside of CAP, we increase that amount to 36 months to give them more time. We've also undertaken some other initiatives to permanently waive late fees for our low-income customers, and then also to waive late fees for those who enter into a payment plan. So we really have been looking at ways to assist customers during this very difficult season. In terms of our Indirect Cap program, that is a program that would be targeted for tenants and for renters. We are on track with the planning of that program. We had intended to have the criteria and sort of the mechanism for dispersing the assistance sort of planned out for this year. However, we are really challenged, as I mentioned earlier, with our revenue. So we have made a decision to push the implementation of our indirect customer assistance program a bit later, and we are forecasting perhaps July of 2024 or later, just due to the revenue challenge that we're experiencing. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go further. Next slide. And so I believe here, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly Kaplan.
Yes, good afternoon. Good to be here with everyone. Happy Monday. As Crystal said, I'm Kelly Kaplan, and I'm going to talk a little bit about all of our financial assistance programs. So I thought I would start with a recap of where we were with our two primary programs at the end of fiscal year 2021. So that customer assistance program that Crystal was referencing, that, as we call everything, of course, has an acronym, that CAP program. That program enrolled more than 15,500 customers since we started in fiscal year 16. We've waived fees just last year to more than $1.5 million. And I want to just point out that that is budgeted dollars. That is not funding coming from anywhere. It comes directly from Wssc water ratepayers. And between fiscal year 20 and 21, we increased participation in CAP by 2,000 individuals. And in terms of the water fund, that is the nonprofit that we have with the Salvation Army. In fiscal year 21, we distributed over $500,000 to more than 3,700 customers. And as Crystal said, customers can get up to $500. The average to those customers last year was $452.06. So that gives you just a little sort of overview of assistance, but let's dig into each of the programs a little more specifically. So there's a number of
Ms.
programs
Kaplan?
we have. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry. It looks like
Yeah.
Chair Carr had a question on that earlier slide.
Yes, thank you for I cannot see the hand, so thank
Sure.
you for interrupting me. I really appreciate it. Yes.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So forgive me if I'm asking this question too soon in your presentation, but my question has to do with the intake for the CAP program. My understanding is, the counties are administering energy assistance, OHEP, and when a customer qualifies for energy assistance through one of the counties, they can be automatically entered into the CAP program. So I guess my question was, how many of the CAP participants are coming through that process through the counties versus directly through Wssc?
Yes, so excellent question. So everyone actually comes through OHEP, through the county, depending on, well, Health and Human Services in Montgomery County. So we need them to help us qualify folks. And just as you said, if they're qualifying for gas or electric, assistance, then they're automatically enrolled in our CAP program. That is the only way that they can, at this point, become enrolled, is through Health and Human Services in Montgomery County, or of course in Prince George's through social services.
And I know that
One
in
mechanism.
Montgomery County, there have been some challenges with processing those OHEP applications in a timely manner. I think Montgomery County is processing those more slowly than any of the other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. So I imagine anyone who is caught in that with a delayed OHEP is also getting delays in receiving the CAP status to get some assistance that way too.
Yes, you can imagine every nonprofit, every social service organization is stressed. There are so many people in need of assistance on many levels, whether that's food or utilities, but all of these organizations are, under-resourced and just have so many applications. You're absolutely right. Prince George's is struggling just as mightily. And when we speak to the folks at the state level at OHEP, it is really across the board. It's across the state of Maryland. So it's tough out there for folks. There's no doubt.
Mr. Chairman, and Kelly, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding that if a customer is, once they do qualify, they are retroactively provided the assistance going back to the beginning of the fiscal year.
Yes, Guy, thank you for that clarification. That's an excellent point. All right, anything else before I move forward?
I don't see
Okay.
any other hands. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for helping me, because of course, when you present, you can't see the hands, so much appreciated. So this is an outline of all of the financial assistance programs, and we're going to walk through them one by one. And I did say this, but I did want to repeat, all of these programs, except for the water fund, are funded directly by Wssc Water ratepayers. So there is no direct assistance that we've gotten from the federal level, the state level, or any county funding. And as I'm going to talk about, the water fund is through customer donations, employee donations, charitable contributions, things of that nature. All right, so CAP, let's dig into that a little more deeply. That customer assistance program provides a credit for those eligible customers for the fixed fee. So that is the account maintenance and the infrastructure investment fee. So that is up to $112 a year. And as of July 1, the expansion, this was at the state level, included, it's 175% of poverty previously. But if you have someone in the household that is 67 years of age or older, then it becomes a bit more generous to qualify folks. So that's at 200% of poverty. So that is something that just changed effective July 1st. And Crystal mentioned this, but all late fees are permanently now being waived for CAP customers. So again, we're trying to do as many things as we can to help those customers. And as we talked about, customers are qualified and enrolled through Office of Home Energy Programs. And renters are eligible for the CAP program as long as they pay the bill is in their name. And also, as Crystal mentioned earlier on, we are working on this enhancement to target our indirect customers, those customers who do not currently receive directly from us a Wssc water bill. They're receiving the water from us, but not the bill. So that is something that we're working on. All right. So I am going to hand it to Crystal for a moment to talk a little bit more about indirect cap, and then we'll keep going down the path with the other assistance programs.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. So we put this slide in so that you could see the steps in sort of the process that we're working through to really develop the CAP program for what we call the indirect customers. Those are customers, as Kelly just mentioned, that do not receive a bill from us. So we're really heavily in sort of like a data collection phase, getting all the data we can through our billing system, and also looking through the documentation we have with the Maryland Office of Home Energy Programs to determine the eligibility criteria, and then to identify who's qualified or who will be qualified for the program. A lot of data collection is underway to help us narrow that down. As I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we are concerned about funding, but identifying a funding source is part of our process, as well as identifying potential partners that we can work with. So we do expect to continue the relationship with the Maryland Office of Home Energy Programs because we're getting a monthly list of eligible households, and that list also includes renters. So we definitely will maintain that partnership, but then as we look to determine how we're going to disperse any funding, there's some other partners that we may consider working with. So that's going to be part of that process. Developing the benefit formula, how do we determine how much to provide an assistance is a major question, as well as how we would distribute the funds. And then, of course, implementing the program will involve quite a bit of communication. So these are the steps that we plan to work through, and some of it will be sort of parallel path. For instance, the funding source is identified as number 3, but we're actually looking at that now. So did I see was there a question?
There's a question, yeah.
That popped up.
Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I thought I heard you say earlier that based on all these steps and the financial challenges, you don't expect indirect cap to be online until mid, I think it's calendar year 2024 by the earliest?
At the earliest. So that's a sort of like a tentative forecast, just given some of the financial challenges that we're seeing right now.
Okay, I mean, we passed authorizing legislation in 2019, so that's at least 5 years. And my recollection is you either asked for that bill or supported it when we came in. So can you just talk a little bit more about that time frame delay? I mean, is that driven by the first slides you were showing? That there's just too much need?
It is driven by what we had on the first slide, in that we're going to need at least $500,000. That's what we projected, just given some of the early numbers that we've seen. And right now, and from a budget standpoint, we don't have that money set aside to be able to fund the program the way that we would like. So that certainly was a challenge. And as you saw on the timeline slide, in 2019, we did undertake a massive effort to change our billing system, implement the new rate structure, and also to implement a new bill. So the priority and the focus was put on those efforts. And so, we are a bit delayed, and I recognize that.
Can I ask a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So first of all, I mean, yeah, you have a new billing system. I still don't get a fixed period bill, which is flabbergasting. But the $500,000 you mentioned, what is that for? Is that just to set up the program, or is that the annual amount you anticipate?
That's the minimum. That's the minimum annual amount that we're anticipating for the program.
So that's the amount to actually support people who need assistance.
Correct.
Indirect, you anticipate a minimum of $500,000.
Correct.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I actually have a follow-up question to that. So I think that my concern is, maybe it's a comment that I'm asking you to comment on. My concern is that we're essentially saying there's 2 sets of needy folks. One set of needy folks gets a bill directly. Another set of equally needy folks pays their bill as part of a bigger bill. But when you look at sort of income level and ability to pay, there's not really a differentiation if we sort of use a parallel to like LIHEAP, which also does direct and indirect funds. And because you're struggling to find the revenue to deal with all of the need that's out there, there's sort of this arbitrary decision to not support people who happen to be in a home where they pay their bills together, as opposed to separating out their bills. And I'm just concerned about how to justify, that seems like a really, it seems arbitrary, and in that sense, especially cruel to people who happen to be in a home where they pay their bills together. And it also seems, you know, we were under the understanding that there was logistical issues that had to be worked out. I do have some understanding of those logistical issues because I've worked with LIHEAP, but there's systems in place that allow those LIHEAP payments to go to landlords. So if you're working with OHEP, there is a model there. So I'm pretty uncomfortable with the idea that we're going to wait another 2 years at least, 3 years at least, before folks who are really struggling now to put all the pieces of that big combined bill together. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to sort of that idea that there's this it's a somewhat arbitrary decision on the part of WSSC about who would get the funds that are available and who wouldn't.
Madam Chair, if you, I'd like to address that, and then Crystal can chime in as well. So this just isn't an arbitrary decision. I mean, given going back to the first slides in the financial turmoil we're in right now, we just went through credit rating screening through the credit rating agencies. We were put on a negative watch by one of the credit rating agencies for this latest round of bonds we were selling. The $500,000 that Crystal spoke about was the minimum. It's just one segment of the population that we've identified who would get this program. If we look at what DC Water put in place for their rental assistance program, I'm sorry, for their water assistance program for renters, theirs was $7.5 million. We don't have $7.5 million around. LIHEAP is funded by federal funds that come down from obviously from the federal government. Our financial services our financial assistance programs are funded by WSSC ratepayers. We don't have a surcharge similar to what the electric and gas companies have for their financial services program. We did not receive any funding from the coronavirus financial services plans that came for the I'll just throw it out there, $81 million that gas and electric companies received. Water did not receive one dime of that money. So this is all funded by WSSC ratepayers. I've said time and time again, and I'll say it again, I will beat anyone to the table who puts a bill in that would provide financial assistance for our customers. I'll beat them to the table in support of it. It just doesn't happen. Nobody puts the bills in to support to provide that support for our customers. So this isn't an arbitrary decision. This if our credit rating drops from AAA bond from a AAA rating, the rate that we have to go to the street to borrow money goes up, which then increases for our ratepayers and the like. So this isn't an arbitrary decision. It's a tough decision that we had to make, and we realize that there's a challenge, but we are trying to make steps to get there.
Thank you for that, Guy. And I do want to talk more maybe when we get to the end of the slide deck about this question about where the support of the funding could come from. But I want to clarify what I mean by arbitrary. From the perspective of a person who's struggling to pay their bill, it seems arbitrary that if I happen to get a direct bill, I could get help. But if I happen to pay all my bills together to the landlord, I can't get help. That is an arbitrary distinction because the same person is struggling with the same sets of bills. One might end up getting evicted because they can't pay that rental bill, and the other may get their water cut off. But the same person could be with the same income level is struggling to pay their bills, which include water, utilities, rent. And in one case, there's assistance available, and in another case, there's not. And that's what's arbitrary, not the fact that you're struggling financially and need to figure out how you're going to get through that. I appreciate that, and I'm interested in having a conversation about how to help with that. What I'm concerned about is that the decision about how to respond to that is that folks who pay their bills together are simply put off for another 2 years to get assistance that they also pay into. I mean, they pay their water, they also pay their water bills, they pay into the bigger pot. And they don't get this assistance. That's the part that I'm saying is arbitrary.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
Those folks who get the assistance from the other utility from LIHEAP do not receive that directly from the other utilities. Here we're being asked by our own accord. We did ask for this to provide this assistance directly from the utility. If you go to any of the other regulated utilities, they don't provide any, not to my knowledge, they provide any assistance directly from the utility to the customer. This is it's a third party that's providing this assistance to them, not the utility directly.
Okay, I think we could continue to, I don't think that we're disagreeing on what the status is. I think that the disagreement is the idea of who ought to be left behind and who ought to get assistance that's available. But I appreciate that. I won't, well, we can discuss more either later today. If there aren't other questions, I'll ask you to continue with the slide deck, please.
Okay. Okay, so on this one, I think we just wanted to share just the path that we've been on for the past few years and the increase in the customer assistance program participation, and also the budget. And also wanted to point out that the budget has increased modestly. We have been able to meet the need based on those who have been enrolled through the Maryland Office of Home Energy Programs, but we do forecast that, you know, opening it up, which we all want to do that. We all want to see renters and tenants covered. We currently don't anticipate that we'll have that funding for the next fiscal year. So I acknowledge that challenge, and we'll continue to work through it. Next slide, Kelly, and I think it may be back to you.
Yes, thank you, Crystal.
Okay.
So I'm gonna quickly go through this because I'm looking at my watch and see that we are already at the 30-minute mark. So the Bay Restoration Fund fee exemption, as you all know, this is something that we collect on behalf of the state of Maryland. This exemption program waives that fee for customers up to $60 a year. Anyone that is CAP certified and enrolled in that program is automatically put forward to receive this exemption. Now, the Water Fund we spoke about briefly. This is the nonprofit that we have with the Salvation Army. Very cool. It was established in 1994 by Wssc water employees, which I think is phenomenal. An individual can put multiple requests to the Salvation Army on an annual basis. It just can't exceed that $500 a year threshold. And while the fund is funded by donors, all of the administrative fees to the Salvation Army, promotional costs, everything, 100% of that is covered by Wssc Water. So that means that every dollar that does come into the Water Fund goes out to water bill assistance. And just to put some perspective, since we started the program, nearly $1.9 million has gone out to almost 20,000 customers. And just since the pandemic began, the Water Fund has provided about $750,000, helping more than 5,200 people across both counties. And let's move to flexible payment plans. Crystal touched on this briefly. This is available for both residential and commercial customers. We are doing everything in our power to get people enrolled in payment plans so that they can avoid that turnoff. And as a incentive, we did recently put forward that late fees will be waived for customers who successfully complete their payment plans. So we're hoping that that's going to entice people. But again, we're working very hard on a daily basis to get people enrolled in these payment plans and avoid that disconnection. And so for that CAP customer, they can get a payment plan up to 4 years. And for a non-CAP customer, they can get a payment plan up to 3 years. And the emergency pipe replacement loan program, which I know you all are familiar as it came through the General Assembly a few years ago. This is a loan program that Wssc Water funds on an annual basis to the tune of $100,000 to help customers in need of replacing that water service line on their property. Replacement being the key, not repair, but to replace. These funds are available on a first come, first served basis each year. The Wssc Federal Credit Union is our partner. They administer the program and they underwrite all of the loans. And any remaining money at the end of each fiscal year is transferred to the Water Fund. So if it doesn't get utilized, it goes to a really important place. And then finally, bill adjustments. For anybody that is CAP approved, they could be eligible to receive a high bill adjustment, removing 100% of excess water and sewer usage for any one billing cycle in a 3-year period. And for non-CAP customers, billing adjustments are available for residential customers once every 3 years under certain circumstances. So that is the extent of our programs, which we have been working very hard to outreach to make sure that we're meeting people where they live so that they know about all these programs and then they can leverage them, as we know 1 in 5 of our customers is behind. So it's really important that we can continue the communication. And I know we've worked with all of you so that you could help us to amplify that message. So thank you for that and sharing with your constituents. We appreciate that very much. Crystal, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And I just want to echo something that Kelly said. We are really working hard to make sure that our customers receive assistance. Just wanted to echo that. So this slide does cover some of the challenges that we are seeing. As I've mentioned earlier, our budget expansion is a bit of a concern and may be limited due to the severe revenue shortfall that we are experiencing. We had not expected the revenue challenge to persist for so long, but it has happened. And that sort of goes into the next bullet about the Fitch rating agency, which has unfortunately revised our outlook from stable to negative due to the pandemic-related pressures. And if there are continued revenue pressures that persist, could likely result in a negative rating action, which of course we do not want to see. One other thing that we briefly touched on are our administrative partners. They are overwhelmed with providing support to their residents and communities due to COVID-19. We meet periodically with our partners, the Maryland Office of Home Energy Programs, and also at the local level to just get a sense of how things are going. And we do recognize that there are backlogs that have persisted for some time. So we do know that they're overwhelmed. And then again, the lack of any federal, state, or county funding directly to support our customer financial assistance programs really is a challenge. And I think if there's anything that we could leave as a takeaway, it's just the request for any additional support or funding so that we are able to do more to assist our customers. So
if I could just, the Chair Carr has a question, I think, before you
Sure.
move off of this one. Thank you.
So I guess just going back to the CAP program for a minute, and I think you said we're estimating about $500,000 as the cost of the CAP program. So it sounds like you've quantified, maybe how many of these indirect CAP customers are out there. And do you have a sense of how that breaks down? I imagine there are some CAP customers that are in a master metered building, that's getting the benefit of the unit level billing that evens out the rate bucket a little bit. And then there are other potential indirect CAP customers that might be living in a townhome or a single family home, but aren't getting the bill. Have you been able to sort of quantify how many total, and then how many of each there might be under a scenario?
That's absolutely what we're doing right now. When we looked at the big universe, we came up with a pretty large number of potential participants. As you can see, we're covering 15,000 or just over 15,000, but the number of potential customers is quite large, potentially 60,000 plus customers that may be on a master meter. So what we are doing now is looking at all of the properties in our database. We're looking at the number of units that they have. It's really a data sort of collection exercise to see who really is qualified and who's in the universe that we need to consider. So I don't have that information today, but that is absolutely what we're actively looking at, is who's in the universe, who might already be qualified through the customer, through the OHEAP, and then who are those that may be on master meters, and those, of course, who are on individually metered would already qualify, but we're just still looking at the universe of who's out there.
Megan, if I could just follow up with a separate.
Okay.
So you've said there's about 93,000 past due accounts, 15.5 thousand CAP customers. So that leaves like 70 something thousand customers who are past due on their water and sewer bill, but are not in the CAP program. And I know this, the shutoffs resumed for residential customers in this month in September. Do you have a sense? I mean, I imagine that the shutoff, threat of a shutoff is a very powerful motivator to get customers who are able to pay to pay up. Do you have a sense of how quickly you're going to be getting those customers who have the ability to pay, but just, you know, hadn't for whatever reason? How quickly are they going to pay up, do you think, once the shutoffs resume and really kick in and people start getting the, you know, the notices for that?
That is a great question. With all of the outreach that we've done, we have seen a marked increase in the number of payment plans, which I think is a good sign that, of course, the engagement is working, and that there's that sort of touch point with the customers that they really do want to pay something. So we have seen a significant increase in the number of pay plans. I can't unfortunately tell you, you know, what that's going to be in terms of the next few months and how many more people will likely pay. I don't know. I do have I believe our billing and revenue division manager is on. Not sure if she's there, but could speak more to that.
Can anyone get on a payment plan, or just can only certain people get on a payment plan?
Everybody can.
So anybody who requests a payment plan can be put on a payment plan.
Yes, sir. And I can give some numbers. I was in a meeting earlier today that Crystal may not have right in front of her. So just to get, so on August 6th of 2020, we had roughly 2,800 customers enrolled in payment plans. 1 year later, on 1 year and a week or a couple of weeks later, we were at 6,000, just over 6,000, 6,081. That was August 23rd. Residential shutoffs began last week on September 13th, and we were at 7,406. And today we are at 8,568 payment plans. So in September alone, we created over 4,600 payment plans. So the collection efforts are increasing with the shutoffs beginning and the late fees as well.
If I could just interject for a moment, Erica Thomas is on. I'm not sure if her photo is showing. Erica, did you want to weigh in on that question as well? Erica? Okay, maybe having a bit of a delay or a challenge there. I can't quite hear her.
Okay, did you want to say more in your slide deck? If not, we can at least see everybody and take additional questions.
Sure.
And track who's trying to talk or not.
Okay, and I can give back. That was a great question. We can follow up on the delegate's question there. And I believe that was the last slide. The challenges slide was the last slide.
Okay. Are there other questions for the presentation? I have a few, but I'd like to let other folks go first. Okay. So I guess my question for the water fund is that only who's eligible for the water fund? Is that also folks who have a bill in their own name, or are indirect customers eligible for the water fund?
So, Crystal, you want me to take that?
I was just going to say the customer has to have the bill in their name to benefit from the water fund.
And of course, if someone doesn't have a bill in their name, they can't get a payment plan either, right? So
I did want to go back to a point that Guy made. Everyone can have a pay plan, but if they're a tenant, they do have to get the authorization from the property owner or from the landlord to be able to enter into a pay plan. So I did want to add that.
And the reason for that is because ultimately the property owner is responsible for the ultimate bill.
And then, Mr. Andes, you had talked earlier about that you've been looking for or asking for assistance. Can you talk about across the country, what are the funding sources that you've identified that water utilities have accessed, and what have you attempted to get access to this point that this committee might be able to support?
I've asked committee members, delegation members across asking for similar fee similar to what Empower has, the electric companies have with Empower to provide some type of funding source for our customer assistance programs. As far as statewide, I mean, we're unique in the fact that we're the only water utility that's outside of a government for the most part, except for up in Western Maryland if it's a private utility. But for instance, Anne Arundel County put $2.4 million of their ARPA money or their CARES money into water bill relief funds. Montgomery, nor Prince George's County put any direct funding into that. We made a request to the county executives regarding that. They heard it, they acknowledged the letter, but nothing ever came about it. So that's that. Like I said, we will anything that would provide, whether it's a surcharge or anything that would provide us a funding source rather than just taking from the ratepayer money that is used to pay for everyday operating expenses and things of that nature.
So you're saying Empower, but I think, do you mean EUSP? Empower is energy efficiency. You're talking about like bill assistance money?
Bill assistance, yeah, you're right. I apologize. Yes,
no, that's okay. I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying that you've requested members of this committee to put in bills for something parallel to that for water? I haven't had this conversation.
I haven't had it with you. That's a fair statement.
No, I'm just trying to understand where the conversation's been to this point. That's what I'm just trying to track.
I mean, it seems that when I had the informal conversations with folks, there's some hesitancy sometimes to introduce a bill that would raise the rates raise the fees that customers pay, similar to other entities that you see come before your committee, your standing committee in ECM. Sometimes the committee bites the proverbial bullet and passes those bills when it's for the good of the overall good, but it just doesn't seem like there's ever been an appetite to formally introduce a bill that would provide that type of assistance for WSSC Water.
Okay. Are there other questions for the presenters? Yeah, Chair Carr?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I was just, I was under the impression that there was at least one federal program that was specifically aimed at relief for water and sewer bills. You know, I had bookmarked an old press release coming out of, you know, a House of Representatives committee. So isn't
there is, and Kelly can
one program that's out there?
There's I know the acronym, and I apologize. It's the Low Income
Household
Water Assistance Program, also known as LIWAP. The state is set to receive $14 million total for that program. That is a first come, first served statewide initiative. So if it's not going directly to the water utility, the actual customer has to apply for that assistance, and then the payment will be sent to the utility on behalf of the customer or the resident. Again, that's 14 million across the state. So that's the only program that's out there. That is in the implementation stage. The state has submitted their plan. It has not been approved yet. They anticipate funding tentatively to start flowing, or assistance to start flowing about a month from now, in November, beginning of November. But that's very tentative. Kelly can expound on that. She's been following that a lot more than I have.
So Guy, you hit all the points. Yeah, when you look at LIHEAP, that's been around for 40 years, and you know, finally money is coming directly to help customers with their water bill. So it's a start, but we still have a long way to go, because $14 million is not much for 23 counties and all of the residents that need assistance. But it's something, it's a start.
Okay. Are there other questions related to, and is that, actually, sorry, does anyone else have questions? I have one follow-up question on that. Is it your expectation that the LIWAP program will go through OHEP as well? It'll be a similar structure and then they'll pay the bill to you?
Yes.
People will buy and pay the bill to you?
It's very much modeling LIHEAP and is going through the same, for at least here in Maryland, going through the same process. Yeah, you're right.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all so much for that presentation. We're going to move to the second part of the briefing, which is on the wastewater geothermal. And so for this part of the briefing, the General Assembly recently passed a bill that expands the RPS to include wastewater geothermal. And so it was, we primarily heard from DC Water when we were going through that process, although we understood that Wssc Water was also supportive. And so we were interested in just hearing how that bill could support Wssc efforts, and also just to give this committee a general overview about that sort of clean energy effort that's part of the work that you're doing. Mr. Taylor, are you taking this one?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, and committee members. I'm Rob Taylor, Energy Manager for Wssc Water, and I'm pleased to be here today to brief you on a recent study undertaken on the potential of wastewater geothermal within Wssc service territory. The industry official name of the technology is called Sewer Thermal Exchange, or STX, and I'll use that term in my briefing. I'd like to say a few words about the recent Maryland legislation you're all familiar with. So if I am repetitive, I apologize in advance. Go over some sewer thermal exchange basics, talk about the suitability considerations, and then give you some project examples of where STX has been implemented close by in DC. Then talk about potential Wssc Water STX site opportunities, and then take any questions you might have. I'm sure you all are familiar with the legislation. House Bill 561 expands the type of energy sources that qualify as a Tier 1 renewable source under the RPS standard. Tier 1, as you probably know, before the legislation included biomass, solar, wind, methane from landfills or wastewater plants, and small hydro. The legislation adds certain wastewater used in certain manners to the definition of Tier 1 renewable source, and the most important bullet is the third one: authorizes energy from a wastewater heating or cooling system to be eligible for inclusion in meeting the renewable energy portfolio standard. What I'm going to talk about today is using wastewater as a heating or cooling source for buildings or facilities. Now, there's 3 requirements for a successful implementation, all the factors that need to fall into place to have a successful implementation. The first is sewer flows. There has to be adequate flow in the sewer system to generate the heating or cooling necessary. It's got to, although the average temperature of wastewater underground is about 55 degrees, the temperature has to be monitored, and very important is proximity to demand source. Both of the sites I'll show you today from DC have the wastewater sewer line is very close to the building. The second one is the sewer thermal needs equipment, needs a filter, a macerator, or a shredder to break up the wastewater. It needs a heat exchanger and a heat pump. So most of the applications would be for new facilities, retrofitting for an existing heating and cooling system, boiler heating and chiller cooling, modified for a heat pump operation would be prohibitive economically. So This really applies for new facilities. And the third major category is demand. There needs to be adequate heating and cooling demand, hot water demand. Snow melt is not that important in this area, but in some other areas it is very important. And the last point I wanted to mention is sewer thermal is a low cost, low carbon, reliable heat exchange source for buildings. Now, I'll show you two technologies. Side stream technology that's shown here takes a side stream of sewage, diverts it to a pit where a macerator prepares sewage for heat exchange. And the second bullet is the heat exchanger at the building transfers the thermal energy to a clean loop. And the third piece of equipment is the heat pump elevates and transfers the energy to end use heating or cooling via refrigerant in the system. The inline variation moves the thermal exchange into the sewer, eliminates the pit, but requires a straight run of sewer, and the hydraulic capacity has to be looked at. I've shown three pictures of different technologies, inline variation technologies by different manufacturers. The sewer thermal physical suitability considerations are listed on this slide. As I mentioned before, flow is very important. Typically, a minimum of 475 gallons per minute is required. It's reliable flow, and upstream flows are not going away, so it's obviously renewable energy. Site considerations, it's got to be near energy demands, and the equipment footprint has to be adequate. Temperature, minimum temperature for heating is 50 degrees, temperature for cooling is 70 degrees. But the average temperature, as I mentioned before, wastewater underground is about 55 degrees. And for pipe size, for side stream, demand dependent, we looked at 12-inch as a minimum. And for pipe insert heat exchangers, a pipe size greater than 16 diameter is required. Now, I've got a couple of examples to show you. One is the American Geophysical Union building in Washington, D.C. There's two figures to keep in mind. One is the equipment. That's the Huber piece of equipment or technology. It's got a flow rate of 600 GPM, but if you look down below on the second bullet under description, the sewer flow rate is 6,400 GPM. It's a very large sewer. It's an old 96-inch sewer main, and it was it's very close to the building. So the building has 62,000 square feet of refurbished office space. Not all the building is completed. Not all the space has been filled in so far, has been developed. And the system provides 480 kW kilowatts of heating and 840 kilowatts of cooling. Now the DC headquarters in Washington is a different technology. It's a Shark unit, SCARC, provides heating and cooling. And the equipment has a flow rate of 250 GPM for 150,000 square foot building. And the reason why the GPM of the Shark model is less than the Huber model in the DC and the Geophysical Union is because this provides supplementary heating and cooling for 150,000 square foot building. It's right next to their pumping station. I don't have the pumping station flow, but it's very significant. So this would lend itself to other buildings serving other buildings in the area once the Anacostia area is developed fully. Now, the consultant looked at the water thermal exchange, wastewater thermal exchange assessment, and they looked at a 12-inch sewer minimum diameter. First of all, they identified existing thermal energy demand at a sub-basin scale, and that's just a Wssc description. And we categorize all our sewers into basins and sub-basins. These are drainage areas where the branch sewers drain into the main sewer lines. They quantified the pipeline development demands and produced a quantitative sub-basin scale ranking for suitability of district implementation. And the map shown on the right shows the thermal energy estimated in megawatts, and you can see the dark lines, the dark purple lines are the highest, but they run along the Potomac River, and the lighter lines are the smaller thermal energy demands. So they looked at thermal supply, existing thermal demand, pipeline thermal demands, and then ranked the demands by area. Now, I won't go into all the rankings, but I just wanted to show you about 5 major areas in Montgomery County and one in Prince George's County, which is part of our Wssc territory for potential future development. In the Bethesda area, the map on the right shows some key facilities, and the sewer lines are all labeled by pipeline diameters. So the smaller mains, the 12 to 21 inch mains, are routed through the downtown area, and there's a potential for supply of heating, cooling, and hot water thermal demands for approximately 100,000 to 3,000 square feet of office space for a given tap. That means for a given application or a given building. North Bethesda area has smaller mains, 12 to 18 mains throughout the downtown area, but there's a potential for supply of, again, heating, cooling, and hot water thermal demands for approximately 100,000 to 300,000 square feet of office space for a given tap or application. The Silver Spring area has a few smaller mains in some part of the downtown area, but as you can see, most of the larger sewer mains fall on the outskirts and creeks and rivers where the low-lying areas are. But there is still a potential of heating, cooling, and hot water thermal demands for, again, 100,000 to 300,000 square feet of office space for a given tap. Now, the challenge, as I mentioned before, is modifying or designing a system for a building or facility that's under development. Existing buildings would not look at it as cost effective to renovate their existing systems to a heat pump, to a ground source heat pump. So this would be a potential for new facilities and new developments. The Shady Grove area is listed in this map. We have smaller 12 to 18 inch and mid-sized mains throughout the area. And there's a greater potential of heating, cooling, and hot water thermal demands for approximately 100,000 to 1.4 million square feet of office space for a given application or tap. In the Gaithersburg area, has the smaller and mid-sized mains throughout the area, 12 to 18 inches and 30 inches. And that has a potential for thermal heating and cooling for approximately 100,000 to 1 million square feet of office space for a given tap. This slide shows our Seneca Water Resource Recovery Facility, which has in the upper left corner, you can see the solar installation. That's 2 megawatts of solar, but there's about 35 acres of undeveloped land. This is at a higher elevation than the wastewater treatment plant. And the flows are considerable, 11.5 to 15.5 million gallons a day, and up to 8,500 kilowatt available capacity. So the potential of thermal heating and cooling and hot water demands is major in this area. It could supply approximately 3 to 4 million square feet of office space. Now, I thought I'd include one site that we're actively looking at for our own use. It's the Anacostia Warehouse and Service Center. There are several large mains, 102-inch and 72-inch, bisecting the warehouse property. And it's got a potential of heating, cooling, and hot water thermal for approximately 3 to 3.5 million square feet of office space. They're very large sewer mains. And there's a CSX railroad line between the warehouse and service center property. And that is a 18-inch collector line currently under CSX, and it's got a potential of heating, cooling, and hot water thermal demands for approximately 800,000 square feet of office space. So this site, although it's not in Montgomery County, it's in Prince George's County, offers a major potential for sewer thermal exchange. So the initial Wssc water sites that we're looking into in more detail is the Seneca Water Resource Recovery Facility that I mentioned before, with potential future development in the 30 or some odd acres, and also the Anacostia Warehouse and Service Center. So that's what we're working on now. And I'll take any questions you might have.
Are there any questions regarding the wastewater geothermal? I can't see everybody, but I don't see hands raised in on the side here. So I assume not. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your presentation. And our next briefing, Chair Carr, do you want to quickly talk about what's going to happen later this week? Oh, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, not a question, but just an announcement that you were starting to make anyway. But our next briefing will be on Thursday, September 30th, and it will be a presentation by the Department of Legislative Services. They've compiled a benchmarking survey comparing Wssc with peer utilities in the Washington, D.C. area, so we can learn more about how there are similarities and how there are differences. Wssc will be present for that briefing, Mr. Andes, and we'll have a chance to respond to it with anything they want to respond. And then there'll be a chance for question and answers. That's 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, September 30th this week. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If there is nothing else for the good of the order, we will adjourn our meeting now. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman.